America. The real legends of the West were Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers were formed in 1866, a year and a half after the conclusion of the Civil War. They were part of the building of America. The real legends of the West were Buffalo Soldiers. The name came from the Cheyenne warriors. They saw two things in the soldiers that they saw in the buffalo: naturally curly hair and that ferocious fighting spirit.
They were the primary line of defense on the Great Plains.
Veterans of World War II were part of the Buffalo Soldiers.
Even though we were segregated and discriminated against, I was proud to be a soldier, especially a Buffalo soldier. The 24 gave us all a lot of pride. We didn't have to always do great things, but whatever we did, we do the very best we could.
I'm glad I was part of what happened until the Buffalo Soldier giving me history. But history is incomplete.
Thank you for giving a legacy of honor, valor, and courage.
To all the Buffalo soldiers who have served our country well, thank you.
Six AAA Central Postal Director started in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
We call it 688 CPD. That's when I was overseas with 6 AAA. We call it the 6 AAA.
You know, the entire country was mobilized in support of the World War.
In July 1943, General Eisenhower had asked for women to be sent to him, and auxiliaries were not allowed to be sent overseas. So at that time, they started to create the WAC bill, the Women's Army Corps bill.
I said, the WAC? I said, I had a cousin that was a WAC. She said, really?
Many of the women in World War II were recruited because of their skills. But at the same time, I sometimes wonder how much they don't really realize what role models they are for the generations of women that come behind them.
White people never expected anything of us. You see, so when you got out there and did something that was extraordinary, they said somebody else must have done that.
While telling that story and documenting what these particular military units, that in most cases were all military, were all Black, and most times they had a white commander, but those soldiers still performed at the same level as their white counterparts in terms of defending and providing for the democracy of this country.
Welcome. Today, we are here to honor the legacies, acknowledge the systemic inequities, and celebrate the service of our Black veterans. Fair winds and following seas, as we say in the Navy, to our brothers and sisters at arms that we lost this year. We are so grateful for your service. We have the watch. Thank you to all of us for joining us today for this important conversation. We have an amazing panel set up for you, and we're excited to hear from you and have you join in the conversation. So please join us in the chat. Our panelists are looking forward to hearing from you and looking forward to your support. My name is Kelly Finn Stormer. I'm the Executive Director of the Combined Arms Institute, and it is my privilege to welcome you today on behalf of Combined Arms, Travis Manion Foundation, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and Minority Veterans of America. Together, we are here to amplify and uplift the voices of our Black veteran brothers and sisters. If you are in need of support today or after this conversation, please connect with us or any of our partner organizations so that we can get you connected to the support that you need. You'll find me in the chat and as well as online on Twitter. I'm excited to listening to this conversation. I would like to invite our panelists to join us today, as without further ado, let's jump into this conversation. I want to point out that none of our panelists are being compensated for sharing their time and their authenticity with us today, and we'd like to change that for the future, but especially grateful to each and every one of you for joining us and for your willingness to share. We all need this conversation, so thank you so much. I'm pleased to introduce you to our moderator, Dewan Wilcher. He is going to be superb at this job. Dewan is a Navy veteran and a fellow surface warfare officer. He graduated from Indiana University, Bloomington, and was commissioned through the Officer Candidate School. He served on 3 deployments and then served as an officer recruiter, where his role there was to increase candidate diversity for selection of naval officers. After that, he served in the veteran serving space and was selected as a presidential scholar, where he worked to bring awareness of hiring biases of veterans, as well as the inequities that exist between officers and enlisted in their transition. He is absolutely the perfect person to host and moderate this conversation today. Thank you, Dewan. I'll turn it over to you to introduce our other amazing panelists.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Kelly. So welcome to everyone here today. I am so excited for the opportunity to moderate this panel. Our panelists have a wealth of experience that spans public service, both military and other government entities, nonprofit leadership, and being Black. At the onset of this discussion, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page of understanding about the forthcoming topics. Number one, you may have heard it before, and you'll likely hear it again today, but the Black community is not a monolith. This means that the opinions expressed by our panelists are their own, and we encourage broad perspective engagement, and this is for the benefit of you, our audience. Our esteemed panelists wear many hats, both professionally and personally, and the opinions that they express here are their own and do not reflect on their respective organizations. We are here to discuss and celebrate the history of Black Americans in service. And while we will be reflective in many aspects, I want us to all walk away with some semblance of what the future can and should look like. What we do know is that the military as an institution is highly regarded and one that all of us respect and appreciate. James Baldwin once said, "I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." I speak for all of us when I say I believe this is our position as well. Conversations along the intersection of race are often deeply uncomfortable. And today, I hope that you do feel discomfort. It will be a signal that the conversation is appropriate. Lastly, I recognize that we host conversations like these around Black History Month, but they do not have to be relegated to the Black History Month season. In fact, they should be had regularly, all the time. These conversations and experiences are not separate and apart from your own. We all impact one another. And as General Powell said once before, each of us is a product of all of our experiences and all our interactions with other people. So with that, let's dive in. I'd like to give it over to Miss Mary to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Tobin. I am the proud senior advisor for Wounded Warrior Military Family Initiatives and Veteran Initiatives at the federal agency known as Americorps. I am also a proud Army combat veteran, having graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in the class of 2003. Go Army, beat Navy. Since since I was medically retired after 2 deployments to Iraq in the Army, I've spent a lot of my post-military career in the nonprofit space, advocating for veterans' homelessness, fighting against poverty, and now advocating for our veterans and their families, and more specifically, talking about those very uncomfortable topics like race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues and peers.
Thank you so much. And now we'll move over to Crystal.
Knew I was going to go after Mary and have to follow up on that amazing introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Ellington. I am the Communications Director for Minority Veterans of America. I am also a proud combat vet of the United States Army. I served in the Special Operations Aviation Unit. I was a helicopter mechanic for 4 years. I was also medically retired in July of 2021. So I am very fresh out of our armed forces, and I am so excited to be a part of this esteemed panel today.
Thank you, Crystal. That was great. Janae, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Duan. Good day, everyone. I am Janae Nash, Chief Program Officer for the Travis Manion Foundation. I, too, am a graduate of the infamous United States Military Academy and had the pleasure of being classmates and sisters and good friends with Miss Mary Tobin, class of 2003. Served for 6 years as a U.S. Army veteran with 1 combat tour before transitioning out of the military to pursue a continued passion of service for our local communities. In my professional experience, I have leaned into the continued empowerment of our veterans, military families, and I am truly excited about joining this conversation because as we think about the community at large of the veteran space, it's very important that we understand how we show up, our lived experiences, our shared experiences, and how they can move towards the betterment of our country as a whole. So thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Janae. And because we are outnumbered Army to Navy, I had to save the best for last. Jeremy, please introduce yourself.
Outstanding. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to start off with that. It's awesome. So I'm Jeremy Butler, CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Like Kelly and like Dewan, also Navy Surface Warfare Officer, commissioned through Officer Candidate School. And let's see, got off active duty back in late 2005, went straight into the defense contracting space, did that, but also went straight into the reserves. So deployed a few times as a reservist and really, realized that I wasn't getting near the job satisfaction from the civilian world that I got when I was in uniform, and that kept getting reminded to me each time I went back in uniform on deployment, things like that. So looked to change things up and joined IAVA back in 2015, and have been there ever since. And so very excited to be here on this panel and looking forward to a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just want to let our audience know that we hope to have this, the atmosphere for this discussion be like a dinner table discussion. So we won't do the traditional ping pong. We're going to go back and forth and engage. So you all have a very broad levels of experience across various sectors. I'd like to start our discussion off by talking about how you manage to wear so many hats, the code switching that's inevitable, and also the potential dissonance that you may feel between your personal and your professional lives. Crystal, would you like to start us off? You're the newest one on the block from leaving the uniform service. So I'd love to know, how are things feeling for you right now?
Things have been going well. I am fortunate enough to be in a position where, with Minority Veterans of America, I was welcomed in with open arms. I was allowed to bring my whole self to my professional setting. So I don't have as much experience code switching here because I have been allowed to, as I said, be my true and full self. It was a lot different within the military. That was where I experienced most of the dissonance that you talked about, Dewan. Having to constantly be in an environment that was mostly male, mostly white, mostly Republican. And again, these views are my own, not those of MBA. Being in that environment was very off-putting and it was very alienating. I was the only Black woman in my unit, so it was a challenge every day. But I would not have traded the experience for the world. I ultimately learned how resourceful and resilient that I can be. And I'm sure Mary and Janae can also attest to that. So yeah, those are my experiences.
Thank you. You hit on something that I think we're going to have to talk about a little bit later as you talk about all of your intersections in service. And you weren't alone with how you felt, but it's often not talked about. So Janae, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, this is a challenge, I will say, for me. When transitioning out of the military and really trying to navigate a new professional career, I had to be very thoughtful about where I placed myself and how I represented not just myself, but my organization. I mean, it wasn't until a couple of years that I actually felt comfortable wearing my own natural hair for fear that I would not represent the organization in the right light. So I went to the status quo, straight hair, long, in a way to assimilate. I would say when joining these types of conversations and controversial conversations at large and serving in a senior position of the organization, it always is in the back of my mind, am I putting myself at jeopardy? Am I putting our organization at jeopardy? Will our board members accept the things that I have to say from my personal view or how that is representative against our organization? And so it is definitely a fine line. I too believe that I am a part of an organization that is very inclusive and accepting of me. And that has allowed me to shed a lot of the concerns and the armor that has been built and formulated over the years. But it is more than just the organization that I'm with. It's also society and society's perception. And that does impact how I receive and also how the organization that I'm with is received according to the words that I put forth. So that's my experience.
That's really heavy, because when you talked about the anxieties, and I'll name it as an anxiety, you didn't use that word, but the anxieties around how you show up and making sure that you are the best representative for various organizations. I'm curious, and I guess I'll ask Mary this, like, how do you manage that stress? I mean, that's an added pressure on you, and you don't even know what landmines you might potentially step on that could blow your spot up, as we could say.
Well, you drink. No, I'm playing. You drink water. It's what you drink. Those who know me know I drink bourbon. Right. We all, those of us who serve, remember there was a saying where they say, do what your rank can afford. And so I keep that in my mind, right? Like, what can I do? What's the most that I can say or do where I won't get fired, I won't get reprimanded, I might not, to Janae's point, bring some type of backlash on my organization, but I'm gonna jump right into it. Let me tell you when it changed for me. When George Floyd was murdered, and I was a senior leader in a veteran service organization, many folks on the chatter from that amazing organization that I used to serve in, we did not talk about race at all. But I'm from Atlanta, I'm from the South. Racism has always been a thing for me. My heart was broken and I didn't know what to do with that energy. But all I knew was either I let the folks at my job know that my heart is broken and I don't know how I'm gonna make it through the day, or I'm gonna have to find a way to fake it or have a breakdown in the middle of all that faking it and code switching and denying that I am experiencing America right now as fully as a Black person, as a Black woman, and my heart is broken. Like and it was at that moment, and I think we all kind of have that crossroads where we decide, you know what, for better or for worse, if I don't open my mouth, if I don't come fully as myself, I will die. And it doesn't necessarily mean physically, but there's something spiritually that happens in you when you can't live your truth. The military teaches us to have the moral courage and the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing. West Point taught us something in a cadet prayer that says, choose the harder right over the easier wrong, and never, ever, ever sacrifice the whole truth. Never sacrifice a little truth when the whole can be won, right? So I think that there comes a point where you have to do and you have to say, and now, now I have no problems going into the workplace and calling the Omicron virus Omarion, and everybody's like, what is that? And I go, it's a Black cultural thing. And now I make people feel more comfortable about me bringing my fullness to work. But I'm 41 years old. I know I look 22. But it's taken me 15 years to be brave enough to do that and to believe that my coworkers and my colleagues will see my value, understand what I'm trying to do and say, and won't penalize me for it. But that takes a lot of bravery, and it's not easy.
That's right. That's right. And you said, do what your rank can afford. The reality is all collar devices don't have the same weight. Even if I wear the same one as my peer, I can't do what my peer does. And that's just the reality. So I like to pass over to Jeremy to weigh in, especially, I guess you're the most senior person here in terms of rank.
I'm not going to try and claim that, that's for sure, but I appreciate you saying that. And no, I'm glad to go because Mary said it so well. And I'm going to touch on a lot of the similar things that she did. For the longest time, I also didn't talk about race. I didn't talk about racism. I went in straight as an officer, which, we got to admit, being an officer automatically makes things a little bit easier for you as a Black person in the military. There's no doubt about that. But for me personally, I'd had a pretty good life. The way I saw myself was I don't have a right to talk or complain much about race and racism because it hasn't negatively affected me anywhere near as much as it has so many other minorities throughout the country. Similar to Mary, that all changed for me with the murder of George Floyd. Luckily, I was at IAVA at the time. I was with an organization that wanted me to speak out, wanted me to be honest about the way I was feeling. And so I luckily had a platform to be able to do that. And it has made things a lot easier for me to speak more honestly and openly about the issues that I see and I feel. And because one of the things that struck me the most around that time was a lot of the conversation was a disbelief, if you will, by a lot of Americans that racism still exists today. And I realized that my silence over my lifetime may have helped contribute to that, because even once I did start speaking out after George Floyd, a lot of people close to me were like, oh, I never knew that you dealt with that. I never knew that you felt discriminated against, in your regular life. They just assumed that everything was good. And I realized we have to be more open and honest about what's going on a day-to-day basis if we're going to be able to address the bigger issues. I think we're still dealing with that, certainly 100% today. There's a lot of dismissiveness, and I loved, I think you mentioned the James Baldwin quote about, critiquing America, and that's how I've always felt, that there is nothing more patriotic than wanting to make your country better. It makes me so upset when I hear people say, why do we have to talk about the past? We're still the greatest country that's ever been, so let's just end the conversation there. And to me, that means that you're not working to make the country better. And that's what we need to do. And that's when we talk about the past, it's to make sure that we have a better future. And so I do try and do that. And to bring it back full circle to your point, yeah. So I'm an 06 now, I'm a captain in the Navy. That does make it a lot easier, but it was not that long ago. I remember very distinctly being in uniform on a watch floor, and it was mostly officers. It was all white officers and me when the verdict came down around the Trayvon Martin killing. And I had to hold my tongue very tightly because once again, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me in uniform to be talking about race and issues like that, because we were raised, in the wardroom, you don't talk about, race, religion, politics, things like that. I think that's all BS now. And, if there is a positive, a silver lining, it's to me that I feel like we have to talk about it, especially within the military where there's still so many issues. We're a diverse force, but that diversity ends in certain areas, certainly within the officer corps, not nearly as diverse as the enlisted corps, and that's a problem that we need to fix.
Absolutely, I agree on everything pretty much, but silence is complicity. We do actually help things go along when we stay silent. And even more so, every one of you all on this call as panelists are leaders in our own respective right. And as Mary mentioned, it takes a lot of courage for us to live in our own truth. But the reality is, as leaders, it's our moral obligation to do so. Because when we let our light shine, others can as well, right? Like they're empowered to do the same. They look at us leading from the front, and that doesn't stop in uniform, as we all know. Here's one thing that I noticed last year around the George Floyd killing is, no, actually not around the George Floyd killing, but it was around the first lieutenant who was arrested in Virginia in uniform. And I was incensed because this was also on the heels of George Floyd and all of the energy around social justice. And what I didn't hear was any VSO speak out on it. I love to know, why do you guys think that is? Why are VSOs so hesitant to kind of touch on the issues of race?
I'll hop in there. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of data. So in 2018, there was a survey conducted by the Reagan National Defense Survey, and it said that 70% of Americans had great faith and trust and confidence in the military. The only other group that came close to that was law enforcement, right? So since 2018, that trust and confidence has actually declined to 56%. And amongst people who are under 30, that trust and confidence is actually somewhere around 38%. So why do I mention this data? Well, actually, in the years that passed since 2018, that survey has now listed systemic racism as one of the top problems that people note when you're talking about problems and issues that face this country, right? And that's including COVID, that's including healthcare and the economy. So why would Veteran Services Organization, who pretty much enjoy this societal approval and neutrality, now open themselves up to more scrutiny coming from systemic racism? Why then would I have to look in a mirror and face the fact that the veterans that I am serving are also experiencing systemic racism? That a young first lieutenant in uniform on his way home will be treated like a common criminal and not like the patriot that he is. That I literally would be going into my neighborhood and profile 5 to 10 times a year, despite the fact that I have proud to have served in the Iraq War on the back of my Jeep. Why? Right? So Veteran Services Organizations, they're not saying anything because it might damage us financially, right? Because if I say something that maybe another base doesn't like, now I'm pulling my donations. And remember, Veteran Services Organizations get money from everywhere. Veteran Services Organizations get support from everywhere. Everybody loves veterans. Who's gonna come out and say they hate veterans? Nobody, right? So, and now if I jump into this arena, I'm not safe anymore. But the challenge is the silence of our friends is literally causing pain for people that look like you and I, people who are underrepresented and minorities. And now Veteran Services Organizations have to look themselves in the mirror and say, are we going to remain complicit with the silence of our enemies and those who seek to continue to divide our country? And so this is the turning point. We're at a crossroads. So let's just be clear. VSOs are comfortable. And in that comfort, there's safety in finance, there's safety in societal approval. But there's no longer a time for neutrality. We got to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to stand for right? Or are we going to keep on being silent? And Janae, I see, are you about
yes,
to
Yes, I need to jump in. Tag. I was ready. You saw that mic kept coming on and off. One, I agree, hands down, with everything Mary is saying. But I would also offer a different position. There is an assumption, right, that we're making in the fact that our organizations, VSO organizations, are being silent, that they're even aware of the damage of being silent, right? There's a lack of representation of people of color in senior leadership positions within the VSO space. And so if there's not representation, how can you acknowledge the injustice, the racism, if you've not sat in those shoes? You don't even sometimes think about the impact that it's having on your broader community that you're supporting, because you have no one at the table helping to bring that up. So I'm just going to offer that as well. So some of it, yes, I agree, it's being neutral, like let me stay in my place because it's about survival. The other fact is, if there's no one at that table that can connect with that lived experience of that individual to highlight, it's honestly something that truly is not at the top of their awareness.
It's getting tight in here. Okay. Jeremy, you want to jump in? Crystal, have at it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go very quickly. I just agree. It is very easy to sit back if your constituency, if you will, isn't raising up and saying, this is BS, we need to be saying something about this as an organization. And Janae is exactly right. So then if the senior leadership isn't also looking out and saying, hey, this is an issue we need to talk about, I don't care if I'm hearing about it or not, this is something that's important to us, you're going to get that silence, because it's easier to remain quiet and not risk alienating your donor base, alienating some of your membership, it's too easy to do that, and you got to be willing to step forward. And it would be a lot easier if the VSOs did speak with one voice around this, and hopefully we're starting to change that, and that's why conversations like this are so important.
Crystal, I'm very interested in your perspective. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I totally agree with what Jeremy is saying. I think that, and also looking at the history of what's been going on and the silence of these VSOs, we have to be accountable as the future leaders, and we have to be the ones that hold those VSOs accountable for their lack of statements on these topics. And I also think that in addition to the upper leadership being very, white and being very indicative of the general climate of the military, I also think that those folks in leadership don't have anyone in their corner to tell them, hey, this is wrong. You need to talk about this. This is something that needs to be addressed. And by them not having the folks in their ear to tell them that this is an issue that's not being talked about, they don't feel like they're doing anything wrong. So just reinforcing what everyone else has shared, and I completely agree.
Oh, Dewan, I'm about to start something.
Go ahead, please
And
do.
The preacher say I preach to myself first before I preach to the congregation. Are we giving our leadership a pass? Because right is wrong is wrong. America has been America. We know the systemic racism exists. So are we supposed to say, you know what? If I see leaders are not addressing it, it's because they don't know. And maybe if they just knew, despite the fact that racism is running rampant, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, all those things are running rampant. What does it take to get senior leadership attention? Is it the death? Is it a murder? Is it something tragic? Or should leaders be always aware, always seeking to make their organizations more equitable? I'm going back on mute. I just started a fight.
So no,
it takes a lawsuit, Mary. In short, it takes a lawsuit for them to listen.
So, okay, allow me to reframe Mary's point. All right. So what I heard is that Janae and Jeremy spoke from the perspective of one stakeholder, which is the donor base. But what I haven't heard is a perspective from the volunteer base, which is the people that we serve in these VSOs. So as Mary is mentioning, what is it going to take to get the attention? It could be just listening to the ear of the volunteer base. What are they saying? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'll just jump in because I also want to defend myself just in case Mary was coming at me. I gotta be a little bit defensive here because by no means am I trying to give the leadership a pass. My point was that both of them need to step up. If leadership, my point was trying to say that, yes, it's the job of leadership to make that initial statement and get there out there with it. But if they're not doing that, that's when the membership needs to be telling the leadership that this is important to them. I think too often what you get is the reverse. You'll get leadership, especially today, leadership being like, oh, I'm going to try and step my toes out into this racial discussion. And then their feeds, their mail, whatever, will blow up with a certain segment that's like, hey, you're stepping out of your line. What are you doing? And they're like, whoops, I'm stepping back. And yeah, too much hate mail coming in. And that's not acceptable. You got to be willing, if you're going to be a leader, I mean, we all know this, you got to be willing to take the criticism as well as the kudos. And you got to be able to stand behind your beliefs.
Absolutely part of the process. And I'm gonna have to hold you to that one here because the next thing I want to know, you have a very large membership base and you have regular surveys. I'm very curious about what are some insights that come from your membership base and some actions that you might correlate to that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I assume that was to me. Was that to me?
What that is, yes, that is
okay. Yeah, it's so, I mean, I love we do an annual, well, I shouldn't say it's annual. COVID threw that off a little bit, but we just completed our member survey. It was actually the largest response rate we have ever gotten in IAVA's history. It was over 5,000 people responded. And this is a massive survey. This isn't a 10-minute survey. It takes about 45 minutes to complete, touches on a whole range of issues. Some of the biggest things that came out, and we'll be launching all the details probably next month, maybe March at the latest. So you get a lot more, but we touched on some of these issues, especially the one that I will address and throw out is around extremism. We asked, is there an issue with extremism in the military and in the veteran space? And I'm trying to remember the definition that we use for extremism, but very basically it focused on resulting in violence or pushing for violence. And that's important because there's a lot of discussion about, what is extremism? Is just being a member of an organization, does that mean you're an extremist, et cetera? Our results came back, and like I said, this was over 5,000 people that responded, was that 1/3 said that they had experienced extremism within the military or the veteran space. 1/3 said that they hadn't necessarily experienced it, but they thought it existed, and 1/3 said that they did not experience it, which to me was a very impressive response rate. So these were all verified veterans or military. They had to verify that fact. And so what you're seeing, 1/3 of our community directly experienced extremism or saw the evidence of it within the community. That alone in and of itself, to me, was incredibly telling that this is truly an issue. Because I think a lot of the stuff you see coming out now after Secretary Austin has done some things around extremism stuff is so much of the pushback is, why are we focused on this? We need to be focused on war fighting, as if making sure that every service member in your military is ready to serve, that as if that's not, taking a big stance on readiness. So I'll stop with that one takeaway from the survey.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow, first of all, the immediate thought that I had is, when you think about that, that's crazy that only 1/3 said they experienced it and another 1/3 said that they didn't. The reality is we also lead with this narrative that the military is colorblind. Well, think about that from the position of folks who rise through the ranks of leadership and they say, I don't see color. What does that mean for that 1/3 of your veterans who said, I feel all the biases playing out in the way that I'm treated? Even in the veteran space, there's a lot of research going into the fact that marginalized veterans, they get diagnosed at a lower rate for PTSD. They don't get their ratings the way that other folks do. They get denied GI Bill benefits. And then if you talk about how much more often Black veterans or Black service members go to captain's mast, et cetera, and then get discharged with bad paper, it's hard to kind of look away from that, right? Yeah.
So I didn't know if I was looking for a sponsor, but yeah, 100% agree. That's exactly right. It all ties in. And unfortunately though, but so many people don't see that stuff. They don't know that those things are happening behind the scenes, and they're unfortunately unaware of it, of the fact that all of this is what's going on and continues to happen within the military. So and I think that's part of the problem.
I know as moderator, I'm supposed to stay impartial, and I will after I just say this, but as a leader, you got to read, and all this stuff is published way too often and way too accessible. So a leader saying that they just are unaware, for me, it feels like willful ignorance. Okay,
hey, Dewan, can I just say, because if you can give me the specific type of mortar round used in American Revolutionary War at a specific battle in Western Kentucky, you for darn sure know that there's 45 to 50% minority enlisted members within our ranks, but less than 5% represented in our senior leadership. And I know you can find those numbers. If you can tell me the mortar shell used in the Battle of Podunk Grass Farming in Western Kentucky in the American Revolution, that is not a real battle, not a real war. I barely passed military history at West Point. Shout out to my professors who believed in me. But no, I completely agree that there was a level of unawareness and probably not malicious ignorance over the years. However, there is just an incredible mountain of data and statistics. Most recently, right, leading back to what you were talking about with GI post 9/11 or GI Bill deferment, like post World War II, where we know down to the county how Black men and women were treated post military experience. I just need for our brothers and sisters in the ranks that don't necessarily look like us to be interested enough to find out, is there equity? And if you find it, man, come on, fight for us, because we are family, right? So that's all I'm asking is learn and fight with us, right? So yeah, I got you, Dewan. High five on you, brother.
My girl, we are one. So to move to a lighter field just for a second, because we talk about how much veterans have outsized impact. You guys are leading in your current spaces, but you're also doing other stuff. Janae, I would love to hear a bit about your experience last year. Ooh, time is flying. Last year at the Bush Institute, what you've been working on and all that, please.
I don't know if that's a lighter topic, Dewan, but I will say I did have the privilege and honor of completing the Stand To program with the Bush Institute in October. And in fact, as part of the program, we were asked to complete a project, and mine happened to be on the fact that representation matters. So this same topic here is what I addressed and wanted to really dig into, because I still stand firmly in the fact that if you don't have individuals in senior leadership positions that look like you, it's hard to diversify your employee and membership base. It's difficult. It's difficult to bring in people if you don't feel that there is someone who can speak on your behalf. You can't be what you don't see. And specifically around my project, it focused on women veterans in leadership. And again, it's very specific to my own identity. I don't think most people understand that in the nearly 2 million living women veterans, 34% of them are women of color. And if you look at our current VSO climate, and even those leadership benches that do have women on them, you don't see 34% that look like me. So it was definitely interesting for me to learn more about the 6888, my history, those who paved the way to grant me the opportunity to serve in the military. And in doing so, I did a lot of learning and research to really try to unpack, like, where's the gap? And so as part of my personal desires and part of Travis Manion Foundation and partnership with Blue Star Families and other organizations that are part of Collaborative, we've been doing having some discussions and building up a best practices for hiring and diversity, equity, inclusion. In fact, there's going to be a launch of the Racial Equity and Inclusion Committee results next week. So please join if you avail. And so we are moving the needle and starting to hold individuals accountable. Kelly and I have been talking wine nights about how we can develop a survey to allow individuals to report out and be very transparent about where they sit and what their goals are and what they're doing to get there. And so I'm really looking to further that effort and continuing to keep that conversation going, because this is great. We have a lot of individuals who say, like, this is important to them, but we're still only reaching 184 people in this country, right? And so in order for these conversations to be had more broadly and to reach the people that can help with the change and the policy change and really pushing it down, we need more of us in the places where our voices can be heard. So
that's right. That's right. We definitely stand on the shoulders of giants too. So here's a big thing that I want everyone to know. The reason why diversity, equity, inclusion is so important is because if we don't have it, everyone loses. An example of that is we talk about how the narrative around veterans is we have outsized impact. We step into whatever our workplaces are, whatever spheres that we perform, and we do better than everyone else. I would love for Mary to talk a little bit about how Black veterans have had outsized impact, especially as it relates to social justice issues such as the right to vote and other things like that.
I love this. I love that you asked me this question, DeJuan, because I get to give everybody a little history lesson. The only reason why Black folks have the right to vote is because of Black veterans. I'll say that again. The only reason why Black folks have the right to vote is because of Black veterans. What do I mean? Does everyone know who Medgar Evers is? Out of Mississippi. He was a NAACP field general, which means that he ran voter registration, voter advocacy. He tried to desegregate the University of Mississippi. He was assassinated by a white supremacist in 1963. He was also a proud Army combat veteran for World War II. When Black veterans were returning from World War II to Mississippi, he would gather them all up and put them in places in front of the courthouse and schools and so forth and so on to try and just disrupt and bring attention to the issue of voting rights and civil rights. When asked, why are you choosing all the veterans? Medgar Evers said, because veterans don't scare easy. You're damn straight, right? So then I'll go next. Hosea Williams, hometown hero from Atlanta. If you see Hosea Williams, you see him in some coveralls, right? He was the farmer looking guy. Why is he most important here in this story? He led the Bloody Sunday Selma March across the bridge with John Lewis. And that Selma March would be the one deciding factor, be the critical moment in civil rights history that would push Lyndon B. Johnson to sign into legislation the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. There are dozens and dozens and dozens, Jackie Robinson included, who was a second lieutenant in the United States Army, who after he served his time in Major League Baseball, decided to encourage the NAACP to push a vote, move your feet with the vote and with your buck. He is a World War II veteran. Hosea Williams is a World War II veteran. And then even now, look at us, look at the peers and colleagues on this panel. We are advocating every single day for military families and veterans. And I mean, I look at my brother, Jeremy, every day he is speaking out on the rights of veterans every single day to get us access to healthcare, better healthcare, make sure that those reports around accessibility and equitability are released to the public so that we can do something about it. There are no civil rights without veterans. Period. So to divorce Black veterans or veterans, period, from the civil rights conversation, the voting rights conversation is to, one, be disingenuous, but the two is to deny us an extra modicum of power. We bring the power, we bring the pain, we bring the force of change. And I'm so proud to be a part of this legacy, which is why when I feel my voice tremble and I'm not sure if my rank can handle speaking out, I think of them. Because Medgar Evers was killed because he believed that if he could sacrifice his life for the rights of all Americans, then he damn well could come back to America and enjoy the rights and the freedoms and the privileges of all of our citizens. So thank you, DeJuan, for letting me give everybody that history lesson. But we've been on the front line. We ain't new to this, we true to this.
Been on it and we still on it, and I'm gonna tell you how. But first thing, I thought you said you didn't do well in military history. Then you just said that 5 minutes ago. But
my mama used to beat me about Black history. So that's what, no, my mama didn't beat me. Mama, I love you. She didn't beat me.
So on the heels of that history lesson, I want everyone to understand also, even present day, how Black veterans are saving democracy. Officer Eugene Goodman, U.S. Army veteran. Now, I know this is tough. It's a little sticky. We don't have to go there, but I'm gonna just say, right? January 6th put it on display what this country has to deal with, okay? And when we talk about the importance and the outsized impact of Black veterans, to see that picture, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Eugene Goodman, masked, hand on his hip, stand back. We know what I'm talking about. We don't scare easy. We stand on these front lines because we fighting for what we believe in, and that's this country. Our voice matters, our presence matters, our leadership is absolutely critical, absolutely critical. If any panelists would like to kind of speak on how they felt that day, I give you the opportunity to do so, but if not, we will move to a Q&A section, but I'll pause for about 10 seconds just to see if there's any thoughts there.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. I mean, I was watching it live. I forget what I was supposed to be doing work-wise, but I think we all had a sense that something of interest was going to be doing that day. So I was working and kind of had the news on and was watching things, and it was just a real-time, absolute disbelief that this was happening in our country. All of the props and symbols that were being carried spoke a message. I think it was obvious to most veterans that were watching that there were clearly veterans involved, just by the way some people were dressed and acting. And from the get-go, I mean, my take continues to be that many in this country are being misguided because of outright lies. And that's, in my view, kind of the bottom line equation here is we need to be making sure that people in power, people that have leadership positions, people that have a microphone are focused on the truth, telling the truth, and pointing out where things are untrue, or we're going to continue to see things like this happen. And it's not going away. I mean, we're coming up on a midterm elections. IAVA has been focused on elections since before the last presidential election. We continue to be very focused on voter turnout, voter registration, because that is I think the biggest fight towards determining whether or not we're going to have another fight within this country. And that's if people turn out to vote and people are able to get registered to vote and they're able to cast their vote. And so we're going to be very focused. And the midterm elections, are always the least turned out for elections, but these are going to be pivotal. I think these are going to be just as, have as big an effect on the future of this country as presidential elections do.
I think you're absolutely right. What I find interesting is that in that narrative, oftentimes we forget to talk about the presence of military veterans who are actually on the other side of that fight, scaling the building, doing all that stuff. I think that's important. It's important for us to recognize who those people were. It's important for those individuals to be held accountable for the actions that they took that day, because it is a disgrace to the military institution and the oath that we all swore to protect and defend this country against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. So I will.
And if I could just add real quick to that point, if you watch some of the January 6th hearings that happened in Congress, many of the Capitol Police officers that testified before Congress were also veterans themselves. And they talked about how much more scared they were on January 6th here in America than they were when they were on patrol in Iraq.
That's right. That's right. So before we got started, or I think when the email blast went out, there was an opportunity for individuals to submit questions, and they have been submitted. I have compiled a list of them. Everyone, you can feel free to also jump in and put questions in the Q&A. I can pull that up also on the side screen. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, but the one that is, like, for me, most important to give the space and the platform is for the women on the panel. I really want the women on the panel to have an opportunity to talk about the intersection between being Black, but also being a woman and also being an officer, which is like, I'll let you guys talk to it. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys have faced as veterans across all those intersections and also active duty? Please share.
Crystal?
Okay, so I will say my largest challenge as a Black woman serving in a special operations unit was the fact that I did feel ostracized and I felt alienated. If I was having a bad day, I had no one to really go to and speak candidly and openly about what I was feeling without fear of retaliation. And I think that it's done on purpose. I don't think that there are a lot of people that look like me that are spoken to join these ranks, and it's done that way and it's designed that way on purpose. I will admit one of the reasons why I joined my unit was because I didn't want to go to Fort Drum in New York because I don't like the cold. I'm a Southern girl. I was born and raised in Florida. I was like, what do I have to do not to go to New York? I'm going to do that. But then as I began to understand what the commitment was and how I had to show up as someone that was part of this, very, very private, secret organization, it was something that I really had to fight with because I knew that I would be by myself and I knew that I would have to kind of buck up or shut up. So I think that some of the things that I went through, like Janae mentioned, not really wanting to be natural and have my natural hair out, those things are the type of issues that people that aren't in our shoes don't have to think about, and it can be summed up in one word, and that's privilege. So what I would want for those that have followed behind me is for them not to have to go through what I went through, and that's one of the primary reasons why I adhered so quickly to Minority Veterans of America, because Black folks should not have to go through this and also be exposed to possibly dying every day as being part of active duty. We should be able to come into a safe space and know that our battle buddy has our six and not have to worry about, is this person gonna let me die because of my skin color?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, for sharing your experience, especially as a newly transitioned officer. We'll go back in the archives to talk about my experience. And one thing I want to highlight, as you can probably see in my Zoom background, you see Mary and I, that graduated from the academy together. There we go. Mary and I, although we have profiles and resumes that are very similar, our lived and shared experience through those trajectories are vastly different. If you would have asked me about my military service, 5 years ago to talk about West Point and some of the experiences that I went through, I would mum's the word. And it wasn't because I felt like I couldn't share anything. I wasn't proud to share anything. And within probably the last 5 to 6 years of seeing more individuals who are concerned about change and the welfare of individuals who look like me and fit the different intersections, because as DeJuan opened with, we are not a monolith, then I have been more open to therefore also sharing my experiences to help solve for the problems as well. That isolating feeling that I personally felt, again, talking about myself, that isolating feeling. We recently, for West Point, graduated 47 West Point Black women in 2021, the largest class in 2021. And people are like, yeah, 47, but when you put that in perspective, when you have 1,000 graduates or only 3,300 Black graduates out of 78,000 from this institution, we ain't moving the needle, right? I'm proud of everyone who came before and those who came after, but there are so few of us out there that have carried so many different rungs. The load, that ruck, is hard to bear sometimes. And so one thing that I will say to any of you who may be experiencing that, I've seen some comments, is that give yourself grace and give yourself space. All right. I usually leave the preaching for Mary. I'm usually her backup dancer. But I really believe that at some point you have to give yourself grace, to give yourself space. You do not have to be the only individual in your organization speaking out about these issues. And thank you to my colleague and friend, Courtney Mitchell, who stands beside me on a lot of concerns that I have and bring up to the leadership of the team for further discussion. We have to be respectful and understanding where each of us kind of lay and the prism of the society. And it is not the Black person's, it's not the Black woman's plight to solve all the issues for everyone else. All right. Pick up a book, read, learn, educate yourself, talk to each other. I'll sit in the back and watch y'all make things happen. But that's my experience, DeJuan. We celebrate these things. We should be a lot further, for our organization. But hopefully those who are on the call can take this back to their organizations and say, we don't need to hire another Black woman person as our diversity, equity, and inclusion champion. How about we hire a cis white male to be that person and allow him to educate and inform and to move the needle.
Thank you. I just want to interject really quickly because you did answer one of the questions that was in the Q&A about how do we keep ourselves from being burned out and keep pushing, et cetera. That's actually one of the reasons why minority leadership is lagging behind, is because they get burned out at the early stages and they don't make it to the end because they have to carry all kinds of extra weight along the way. So if we want, as a society, to have more representative leadership, we need to be thoughtful about how we are forcing folks to show up and assimilate, or should they need to. We need to think through that and be very thoughtful to make sure we give space for people to be their authentic selves and bring all of their brilliance to the table. Go ahead, Mary.
Listen, it's hard to follow my two sisters who started this conversation out, but I'll just share a small story. About 5 years after I left the military, I found myself as a nonprofit executive director in Brooklyn, New York. And part of my job description was to solve poverty in this particular community. Yep, just said solve poverty. Imagine that, no small feat, no big deal. And I started getting burnt out, facing the issues that I was facing every single day, started getting to me mentally, and it was triggering post-traumatic stress. There are certain times, and I'm going to speak out a little bit publicly about this, and if you can identify what I'm about to say, go ahead and put it in the chat. There's certain times of year that coincide with battles or surges or something traumatic that happened during war. My body feels it, it responds to it. It took me years to recognize it. And that particular year, it's in the month of March, a lot of stuff was going on in that community. We lost some kids that I was trying to help, and now I have post-traumatic stress. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I got in my Jeep, drove to the local VA clinic, and was just like, hey, I need some help. Saw this nice white lady therapist. She said, come on, I got you. She brings me into the office. The first thing she says to me is, so Sergeant, were you dishonorably discharged? Obviously, she didn't even care about reading my file. So not only could I have not been an officer, but I was also dishonorably discharged. Then when I told her, no, this is my rank, this is what's going on, please help me, and all the things, she then goes on to say to me, you know what? I'm going to prescribe you something today, but you know, the truth is I don't understand why women serve in the military at all. Matter of fact, women are not fit to be in combat. I don't know why y'all want to go to war. I promptly got my bag because I didn't want to flip the table over on this white lady, but I got my bag and I got up and left. And as I cried myself home, I didn't know whether or not what I was more angry about, my melanin or my ovaries that day. That's what Black women experience. And every single day we're trying to decide what we're going to be angry about or what we're going to ignore. And if by ignoring that or, you know, taking a high road, will that be detrimental to the Black women behind me? Will it be detrimental to the minority woman behind me? Would it be detrimental to the disabled veteran, the gay veteran, the Muslim veteran? Will me not speaking up or acting out today be detrimental? And so when Janae just talked about space and grace, that was a sermon, sis, that you just preached to me. Got to give myself space and grace, but we're constantly trying to worry about if we're balance that struggle. Because if I don't speak up, gosh, am I damaging someone else coming behind me? And unfortunately, fortunately for my white brothers and sisters, that's not a burden you necessarily carry, but I just want you to be aware that we are carrying that.
Thank you all very much for taking us there, for being intimate enough to share those stories, because they're tough. And I'm sorry that you guys have to deal with that. That's all I really can say at this point around that. There is another thought that's here in the Q&A space around, I'll just read the question. There are veterans that complain that IAVA is left-leaning. Are they implying that in order to be a veteran, one must be right-leaning? I will start and give it to you, Jeremy, to answer that question. But by law, nonprofit organizations are non-political. 501c3, you can't be political in that way. But Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, it's certainly not the first time we've heard that, and it's interesting. And so let me start with a personal story, which is it's shocking to me how often I will meet someone, and then when they hear that I'm a veteran, they make an assumption about my political leanings, and I'm always kind of blown away by what reality they're living in. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's the fact that IAVA is often seen as being a liberal or a left-leaning organization kind of blows my mind, because I wonder, and I assume that it's based on a few things that we, fought to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that we, had a campaign to support women veterans. It's these types of causes that we've undertaken that seem for some reason to have given us this liberal viewpoint, because I think, as the questioner asked, there is often this assumption that if you're in the military, you're a conservative and you're probably a white male. And we all know that that's not the case. That has never been the case. I don't know. I'll kind of stop. I'm not sure if that fully answers it. I mean, I feel like it, I think it does, but we're proud of the stances that we've taken, and sometimes, it causes us to get labeled a certain way. But as you said, not only is being bipartisan in our design as a 501c3, I mean, if you look at every piece of legislation that we have fought for and ultimately passed, it passed because it got votes by Republicans, Democrats, and independents.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So we have about 20 minutes before I want to start to wrap us. So I want to shift our conversation to more of a solution oriented, because we definitely hit on some issues here. And I'm seeing a trend in the questions that came in earlier and some trend in the trend of the questions that are coming in now. What can we do? And so I'll just read one of the questions directly. Sorry. How can we as ERG leaders in companies across the country better serve our members and bring light to some of the items that we have discussed today? So for those of you who may not be familiar with the ERG employee resource groups, they are, tangential to the organization that people work in to help support groups of identity, of various identities. And a lot of organizations have veteran ERG groups. So what do you guys think? How can we leverage ERGs to kind of make change, or are there better things that we can do from a community standpoint?
I mean, I think we can leverage any group to make change. I think we should leverage everybody to make change. I think the fact that you have an organization, a company on this webinar right now, seeking to learn and seeking to grow and taking this back to their organization is how you affect change. And so, yes, absolutely. I think that you not just leverage the ERGs, but helping to inform the ERGs and the larger organizational base as you're trying to affect change. Cultural competency is important, right? And everyone must take the time to continue to learn, to understand, to reflect and be honest with where they're situated and what they're doing to ensure that we are living in a world that's more equitable and inclusive. And so, yeah, I think everybody is a part of this equation.
Absolutely agree. And there's another point that Crystal might be able to help us with is certain resources that we can use to educate ourselves about minority veterans. Like, where can people go to even start this journey to think about how things affect others and certain groups of people and not other groups of people? What do you think?
So, I mean, I think that as many of the panelists have said already, the main thing is education. I think that once folks understand how to approach a problem, especially if people are looking for, say, for instance, ways to get involved into the community and they're looking for a minority veteran service organization. For instance, Minority Veterans of America, we have partnered with When We All Vote this year to make sure that we get that voting initiative out, because as Jeremy said, midterms are coming up. People don't care about midterms, but it's just as if not more important for everyone to, first of all, be registered to vote and understand what their voting status is, and also understand that there are folks out there that are putting all their efforts into making sure that your vote is not counted. There were more voting discriminatory laws passed in 2021 than there almost has ever been. So it is not a matter of, oh, they may not be willing to let me go to the poll. No, this is a real thing and it's really happening. So doing your research and making sure that you're getting involved with those VSOs that are boots to the ground in the community is how you really impact change.
Absolutely agree. Any other thoughts there?
Just one quick thought I'll say is that what I always find is then when some people hear these types of conversations, I have to stress that what we're talking about is not a zero-sum game. When you're talking about supporting minority veterans, when you're talking about supporting veterans that have been disenfranchised in the past, usually what you're talking about is doing something to uplift, or that will ultimately uplift all veterans. They see it as, hey, if you're talking about a community that is not my own, that means you're fighting for them and you're not fighting for me. When in fact, it really, truly lifts all veterans. If we do something to help Black women veterans in the healthcare side of things at the VA, what that is ultimately going to do is improve healthcare resources for all veterans at the VA. Too often, people see it as, if you're talking about that, you're not helping me, and they want to see how it's going to benefit them. And the reality is, when we lift up some veterans, we're lifting up all veterans ultimately.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. This kind of takes us back a few questions as the ladies shared their experiences. I was remiss to ask about Black women-led VSOs. We talk about the absence or the lack of presence for other leadership, but do we know any off the top of our hand? Because I personally don't, and I think that there's an opportunity there. So if someone does, please shout them out. Let's give them some space.
I believe Ginger Miller also, I'm seeing the VSOs being dropped in the chat, but Ginger Miller with Women's Veterans Interactive is also a CEO of a VSO.
Okay. So I see the chat kind of going up with other organizations. Please take a look at that, folks. We want to make sure that we amplify all of these voices and organizations.
Along that line, real quick, if I could, and I know there's many VSOs that don't dabble in the advocacy space, but I got to give props to the House Veterans Affairs Committee because they are doing a really great job of pushing well beyond the traditional VSO community to try and bring in smaller, newer organizations, especially organizations that are represented by predominantly underrepresented people, to give them a seat at the table. It's a small step in the big picture of things, but I do give them credit. We spent a lot of time on the advocacy side, and it's been impressive to see that. They definitely have done a good job.
Yeah. And as we go forward, so Secretary Austin has made a lot of sweeping changes with establishing offices of the DEI, where folks leading those efforts, just kind of helping to move this narrative along. As you guys have seen, he's been on camera in front of senators, pretty much getting chastised about positions that were backed up by data. But I would love to have some opinions from you all about your thoughts on that. Do you think that we're marching down the right path? I know I'm proud that he's doing this work, but could we be doing more?
We could always be doing more. I mean, it's overdue. I mean, justice delayed at any point is not enough. I think of one of Dr. King's sermons where he starts off and he says, "How long? Not long." And he goes, "Well, why should we wait any longer?" You know, like we should never be denied rights and accessibility and equity. So one, I'm very proud of Secretary Austin. He is a proud graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. So I have to point that out. And he clearly is choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, and making really key appointments on his own staff that are specifically addressing extremism in the military, specifically addressing equity, literally revamping whole offices to finally address these issues that we have plenty of data and statistics to support profiling. And you mentioned bad paper earlier, you know, the inequity and the types of discharges by race, the inequities in rank, period. I mean, if we look at the Marine Corps alone, look how long it's taken to get some of the more high-ranking individuals in the Marine Corps, 3 4-star generals, 1, 2, 3, 4-star generals in the Marine Corps. I mean, so the fact that we do have Janae talked about it earlier, right? If I don't see what I want to be, then how can I be it, right? So I feel like for once, you know, we have not only an advocate who's making changes, but an advocate that like looks like us. And that says a lot. It is emboldening a lot of our junior officers, our juniors, our senior enlisted ranks members who look like us to speak out. I've never seen Twitter talk so much about race, military Twitter talk so much about race and calling that stuff out amongst the ranks ever. And a lot of that is being led by Secretary Austin. So I'm super proud as a Black military veteran. I'm proud of him personally. As a West Point grad, I'm proud of him. But even more so, I always look at you when you get in this position. What are you gonna do? Am my pride gonna end the day that we celebrate you, or am I gonna be able to continue to say, you know what, you were the right person for the job because you're making the changes that are needed? So, no, it's not enough, but this is the right start for sure.
Absolutely agree. So we are coming to the space of our panel where you guys as panelists get the opportunity to just talk about what you've got going on, talk about some programs that you would like to amplify. And since Mary, you're still on my screen because you're the last one to speak, I will pass it to you first, and then I'll just go across everyone who's on my screen.
I like it. I'm the federale on the panel. So I work for an incredible agency called Americorps, formerly known as the Corporation for National and Community Service. We are the do-gooder organization of the federal government, meaning we focus on volunteerism and community service. Up until this past administration, we gave out about $1 billion, almost $1 billion of funding to organizations, nonprofit schools, and all across the country. Now we have almost about $2 billion that we give out. People compete for grants to solve poverty, address climate change, veterans issues, all the things. I'm very open with saying less than 1% of our funding goes to VSOs. I need for y'all to help me change that. I'm trying to give this money away, y'all. I'm trying to give this money away. So please help me change that narrative. I'm the only veteran who is a senior leader in that organization. And obviously I'm Black, so I get to advocate for a lot of those issues. So if you are a nonprofit devoted to fighting poverty or in underrepresented communities, reach out to me. If you are a nonprofit who is also devoted to addressing issues that impact veterans and military families, reach out to me. And that's what I do. I want to give this money away and help me help you. So thank you all.
Love it, love it. Thank you. Crystal, you are up next.
Thank you so much for the space. And Mary, please feel free to give some of that money our way. We are more than welcome to take it. Our wallets are open. So minority veterans, we are completely committed to changing the narrative of the American veterans. So we are primarily focused in the arenas of LGBTQ, women, veterans of color, and also religious minorities. We have a ton of things coming up this year. We're going to be bigger and better. We're getting ready to celebrate our 5th year anniversary. We are also doing an event next month for Black History Month. More details on that to come soon. And we are also going to be resuming our supply drop tour this year. Last year, we did 6 cities in 6 months and gave out over 2 tons of food to various members of the community. We are also going to be doing our Emerging Leaders program that's coming up, and we're going to be doing that, I want to say in March or May. More details on that coming up soon. We have a lot of things in store, so please be sure to follow us at Minority Vets on all platforms.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Janae.
Thank you, Dewan. Again, thank you everyone for joining the conversation. It's been a healing moment for me, as well as understanding that there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm glad to have my peer panelists and those supporters and allies on this conversation that are with me in moving this needle forward. So with that being said, the Travis Manion Foundation, we empower veterans and families of the fallen to develop character in the next generation. And we do that through various ways and mechanisms. We have a flagship youth development program that focuses on character and leadership. And so for all those veterans that are here, please go to travismanion.org and join the mission. We need you. As much as we're talking about representation and leadership in VSO space, we need representation in our community. We need young men and women to see us, to understand what the possibilities are hold, to help mentor, to guide, to nurture, to love. And so if you have a passion for impacting change with regards to our youth, please join the mission at travismanion.org. We're actually having a webinar on February 24th that you'll be able to join to learn more about the Character Does Matter program and to basically share best practices and additional training mechanisms to get you out there to support and educate the future generation. That is travismanion.org as the Chief Programs Officer. I'm also going to do a plug to Mary because she did not do this plug, but Mary, Bridget Bell, and Jamal Robinson, they are also the co-founders of Do More Together. That is the West Point Association for Black Graduates, but it is open to all. So please also visit Do More Together. If you want to hear these conversations, if you want to be about the change, if you want to put the plans in place, that's the place to go and to be. There's a summit every year, but there are definitely sessions and ways to get involved and active. Again, you don't have to be a West Point grad. If you do, go Army. But we welcome all to this conversation so we can do more together and continue to impact change for the Black veteran community. That's my plug.
So I definitely plugged in to do more together, and it was phenomenal, folks. I don't know if it was the first time or not, but Mary, you did a great job, and everyone else who was associated with that did a great job. Jeremy, you're up.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. So a few things we talked about voting. Please get registered to vote and vote not just in the midterm, but primaries for the midterm are perhaps more important. I'll just plug this for anyone listening from Texas. In order to vote in the primary for the midterm, you actually have now 4 or 5 days in order to register to vote. Otherwise, you won't be able to vote in the primary. So voting could not be more important. So please, that's for the primary. For the primary of the midterm. So anyway, vote, vote, vote. A couple other big things that IAVA is focused on are toxic exposure legislation. We'd be remiss to not talk about this. Burn pits. And more. It actually goes back to veterans in the first Gulf War who were affected with illnesses because of their service then. Really, it's coming down to a fight for money. We were just on a big panel last week with the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and it couldn't be more clear that this is a fight over money. There is tons of support for this legislation that would bring healthcare and benefits to anyone exposed to and sickened by toxic exposure. Around the burn pits issue, basically it's a whole list of illnesses, and if this legislation passed, basically if you served in any of these countries that are on the list and you come down with any of these illnesses, the assumption will be by the VA that you were sickened because of your exposure to burn pits or other toxins. But it's going to cost money. Right now there's a lot on in the Congress that feel that it's too expensive. Our view is you basically just sent folks to war for 20 years and never cared about the cost. Why are you now nickeling and diming when it comes to taking care of those who fought? So if you go to IAVA.org, you can go to our Take Action pages and send a message to your members of Congress telling them to support and pass this legislation. That's a big thing. Another one is we're pushing for further changes to the way Department of Defense handles sexual assault claims. Some breaking news today that I'm still trying to catch up on is it sounds like President Biden signed an executive order bringing into law some of the pieces of the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, which is huge. That's a great start. I can't speak too in detail about what all is entailed in that because I just saw it on Twitter. And so, but that's huge news. We're going to continue to push for that. The last thing I'll plug is we have a program called Quick Reaction Force. It's available for any veteran, any era, any discharge status to help you with anything you need. It's Quick Reaction Force. You can call 855-91-RAPID or go to our website and click on Quick Reaction Force. If you need help with the GI Bill, help getting access to medical care, if you're having issues of housing, homelessness, whatever it might be, you can connect directly with a veteran advocate that will work with you to get you services and support. So thank you. Oh, and please become a member of IAVA. It's free, and despite the name, it's open to anyone and everyone. If you were a veteran, if you served, if you're a civilian who just supports the military and the veteran community, we want you to sign up so we can keep you informed. Track us on social media and at IAVA.org. Thank you. And thank you to all the panel. This has been incredible.
So let me just say, first of all, I told you guys that the panelists were rock stars, all of them. They got so much going on. And I'm so proud to have been a part of this panel with you all. I just kind of want to wrap all the things that we've covered, at least the top nuggets. Number one, leadership is hard. And leadership is even harder when you have extra identities that come into play for people to understand how to follow your lead. Number two, leadership is a moral obligation. We talked about the reality is it's tough for us to do what we do, but for others to feel the courage and to be emboldened to do it, they're looking at us. It's if not me, then who, right? That's the tagline. It really is that simple. Number three, you don't have to be alone in the fight. Space and grace. I really do love that, Janae. That's something I'm gonna walk away with. And then lastly, just be authentic. I felt the love in this conversation. It felt like home. It felt like dinner time conversation. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, that'll be all. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Oh, one last thing. I'm sorry. To Kelly and Combined Arms, thank you all so very much for bringing us together for this conversation and being bold and courageous enough to let us be our authentic selves. We really appreciate you. So that's all we have for today, folks. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.